The Bengals have a pretty unique advantage when it comes to hosting prospects on pre-draft visits, and in this video, I'll explain exactly how they're capitalizing on it. What's up, Bengals fans? John Sheeran of A to Z Sports Cincinnati here, and for those watching outside of the state, this is a message for you. Sometimes it does pay to live in Ohio. Now, maybe you don't want to live right next to the Ohio River when it rains for 4 straight days, but that's beside the point. We are just about 4 months removed from Ohio State winning the first ever 12-team college football playoff national championship. It was a phenomenal season for the Buckeyes. They assembled a really expensive but really talented roster, and they put together another championship team. So it should come as no surprise that the Bengals are very interested in a handful of players from that specific team. You're talking about Jack Sawyer, Ty Hamilton, Quinshon Judkins, and Travion Henderson have all made or will make visits to the Cincinnati Bengals leading up to the NFL draft. Now, what's interesting here is that NFL teams have a limited number of what's called top 30 visits that they can use on prospects in the NFL draft, and they can fly them in, they can get medical checks, they can just interview them, get to know them a little bit better, but they can only do that with a certain number of prospects every single year. So it makes a lot of sense that you want to be really selective about which players that you want to have visit. If you have a lot of questions about their character, their background, anything that you may have missed in the evaluation process, or just guys that you are really interested in drafting either really early or really late, maybe bringing in as an undrafted free agent. Whatever the case may be, the Bengals typically end up with a decent amount of players that they bring in for visits leading up to the draft. Now, does that mean that half the Bengals draft class is going to be Ohio State Buckeyes? I'm not ready to go that far yet, but the Bengals have an interesting advantage here that pretty much the entire NFL does not. Because Ohio State is one of the programs that's close enough in proximity to the Cincinnati Bengals where player visits from that school can be classified as local visits. Now, local visits don't actually count as top 30 visits, so the Bengals can have all their top 30 visits separated from checking in on players from the reigning national champions, and that is a pretty decent advantage. Now let's go through those players once again. You have a defensive end in Jack Sawyer, a defensive tackle in Ty Hamilton, and 2 running backs in Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. What is the likelihood that the Bengals will actually draft any of these guys? Well, they're probably only going to be able to draft one of those running backs. I think Henderson and Judkins have a really good chance of going in the second round. I feel like if the Bengals want either of those guys, they're going to have to pick them with their second round pick. And while Judkins does seem like the better overall athlete, he's a little bit larger and he's really fast. He had a lot of production before he got to Ohio State when he was in the SEC as a true freshman down at Ole Miss. Henderson is a team captain. He's really good in pass protection. He's just a well-rounded player. I feel like Henderson would be the guy that the Bengals would target. And he was also a 5-star recruit, which does matter a lot when you're talking about Bengals draft targets. And the Bengals did meet with a lot of running backs at the NFL scouting combine. There's clearly a hole at RB2 next to Chase Brown. It should be expected that they do draft a running back at least at some point in this draft. But will they draft one in the second round? I'm not quite ready to predict that just yet. But I think if they had Jack Sawyer graded as a second round prospect, I think he would very much be in consideration for that pick. Again, another 5-star recruit, team first guy from Ohio. He's not exactly a Sam Hubbard clone, but it would make a lot of sense to replace Sam Hubbard with, let's be honest, someone who looks like him. But Sawyer didn't provide any athleticism testing. He won a lot as a pass rusher, but his production wasn't quite indicative of a high quality player. Plus, he's got really short arms, and I don't really know what Al Golden's preferences are in terms of length for his defensive lineman. Regardless, if Sawyer falls to the 3rd round, I definitely think he's a prime target to look at. And then you got Ty Hamilton, who's probably going to be drafted after all of those guys that I just mentioned. Now, defensive tackle is kind of a weird position to project what the Bengals are going to do in the draft. I did predict that they would draft Walter Nolan in the 1st round, and I still stand by that. But if they don't draft Walter Nolan or any defensive tackle in the first 2 rounds, they may punt on that position altogether. And a guy like Ty Hamilton is projected to go anywhere between the 4th and 6th round. He may just be very similar to guys that they already have on the team. But clearly they do like enough about Hamilton's profile to come bring him in, get to know him a little bit better, and maybe if he does slip beyond expectation in the draft, maybe they take a flyer on him. But the point of all of this is, if it seems like the Bengals are focusing a little bit too much on Ohio State players and not spreading out their visits with more equal distribution across the country, there is a reason for that. It's just like I said, sometimes it pays to live in this state.